I never thought a wedding could turn into one of the wildest nights of my life, but here I am, sitting on a slightly wobbly folding chair in the corner of the reception hall, trying to make sense of everything that just happened. Honestly, it all started pretty normally. Me, a guy who usually avoids formal events like the plague, dragged to my best friend's wedding, because you have to support your friends, dude. And sure, I supported him, but not in the way anyone expected. The minute I stepped into the venue, I realized weddings are way more complicated than I remembered. There's the usual mix of awkward small talk, people pretending they're having fun, and enough free alcohol to keep a small country afloat. I was hovering around the open bar, partly out of boredom, and partly because I figured if I was stuck here, I might as well enjoy myself. That's when I saw him. His name's Alex, the groom's younger brother. Tall, with that kind of effortless charm that makes people stop mid-sentence to look at him. He was helping the groomsmen carry in some last-minute decorations, and when he caught my eye, he gave me this quick, easy smile that made me feel like I wasn't just some random guy at a wedding. He had this calm confidence, like he owned the room without even trying. I know that sounds cliche, but it's exactly what it felt like. I'm usually terrible at starting conversations in these situations, but somehow I found myself walking over to him, probably because the alcohol had loosened me up more than I expected. We started talking about stupid stuff, how absurd weddings are, the best way to sneak off for a smoke, and whether the groom looked nervous or just hungover. He laughed at my jokes, and I swear, that laugh was the kind that makes you want to hear it again and again. Before I knew it, we were drinking together, and the rest of the wedding was a blur of clinking glasses, dancing to songs I didn't know, and swapping stories about the groom that maybe should have stayed in the dark. At some point, the groomsmen pulled Alex aside, and instead of going back to my table, I followed, more curious than ever. That's when it happened, the moment I didn't expect. The groomsmen's room was this cramped little side room, kind of like a staging area for the guys before they walked down the aisle. It smelled like cheap cologne and spilled beer, but there was this kind of electric energy in the air. Alex looked at me, and without any hesitation, he said, "Want to get out of here for a bit?" It was like everything shifted in that second. I knew things were about to get interesting, and honestly, I had no idea where the night would take us. But looking back now, I'm pretty sure that tiny, sweaty room was the start of something I never saw coming. So yeah, that's where I was, sitting there, trying to piece together how a kind of stranger at a wedding turned into the most important part of my night, and maybe something way more than just a good story. And trust me, you're gonna want to hear what happened next. I didn't have to think twice. "Yeah," I said, probably with a stupid grin on my face. "Let's get out of here." He motioned toward the door, and we slipped out quietly, closing it behind us. The hallway was dimly lit and quiet, a welcome contrast to the noise and chaos of the main reception. Alex pulled out his phone and checked the time, then looked back at me with a mischievous glint. "There's a rooftop bar a few blocks from here. Not many people know about it, kind of a secret spot. You in?" I hesitated for a second, not because I wasn't down, but because this felt different. More than just drunken escapism. But honestly, I was curious, and honestly, I wanted to see where this night would go. "Lead the way," I said. We stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the wedding fading behind us. The city felt alive around us. Neon signs buzzing, people laughing on sidewalks, the distant hum of traffic. It was like we'd traded one kind of party for another, but this one felt more ours. The walk was short, and when we got to the building, Alex led me through a nondescript door and up a narrow, twisting staircase. At the top, the door opened onto a small rooftop that looked out over the city skyline. String lights were draped around the perimeter, casting a warm, golden glow. There was a small bar set up in one corner, and just a couple of other people scattered around, mostly keeping to themselves. I took a deep breath, feeling like I'd stepped into some secret club I never knew existed. Alex poured us each a drink, something strong and smoky, and handed me mine. "To sneaking out," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "To the unexpected." I replied, and I meant it. We found a spot near the edge of the rooftop, sitting on a low ledge with the city sprawling beneath us. The noise from the wedding was a distant memory now, replaced by the quiet buzz of the city and the soft music drifting from inside. Alex was different here, less polished, more relaxed. He kicked off his jacket and ran a hand through his hair, then looked at me like he was deciding whether or not to spill something. "So what's your story?" he asked, eyes sharp but kind. I shrugged, feeling a little exposed all of a sudden. Nothing too interesting, honestly. Just a guy who showed up to a wedding he wasn't that excited about and somehow ended up on a rooftop with a handsome stranger. He laughed, and the sound was easy and natural. Fair enough. But seriously, what do you do? What's your life outside this madness? I told him a bit about my job, office stuff that was mostly boring but paid the bills, and how I wasn't great at social events but was trying to push myself. When I asked him the same, he got a little quieter. I work in marketing, but I'm really more into photography. It's a weird mix, but I try to balance the two. Helps me stay sane. There was a pause, and then he looked at me with this intensity that made my stomach flip. You seem like the kind of guy who doesn't take things too seriously, but I bet there's more under the surface. I laughed nervously. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I'm just really good at hiding it. Alex nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what I meant. For a moment, we just sat there, watching the city lights flicker. The air was cooler now, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. He did the same, but then he scooted a little closer. I'm glad we got out of there, he said softly. Me too. The rest of the night kind of unfolded in these perfect, unplanned moments. We talked about everything. Music, bad dates, what scares us, what makes us laugh. At some point, the conversation dipped into more personal stuff, and I found myself telling him things I'd never said out loud before. Maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was just the way he listened, but it felt real. When I looked at him, I noticed the way his eyes caught the light, how his smile softened when he thought I wasn't looking. And then, just like that, the space between us felt different, charged with something new. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead, and my heart did that stupid, unpredictable flip again. Can I be honest? He asked. Please, I said, though my voice was quieter than I intended. I wasn't really sure how tonight would go, he admitted. I mean, weddings are weird. But then I saw you at the bar, and something just clicked. I didn't want the night to end. Me neither, I said, and I meant it. We stayed up there, wrapped in that moment, until the first hints of dawn started to lighten the sky. I don't know if it was the city lights, the late hour, or just the way everything felt suddenly possible, but I realized I didn't want this night to be just a one-time thing. When we finally headed back, it was with that perfect mix of awkwardness and hope. The wedding was still going, but for me, the party had moved to somewhere entirely different. And honestly, I'm glad it did, because sometimes the best nights start when you step out of the expected and into the unknown. Walking back toward the venue under that faint early morning light felt surreal. The city was quiet now, the usual buzz soft and distant, like we'd stepped into a different world. I kept stealing glances at Alex, who had that kind of calm you don't see often, like he was completely at ease, even though we'd just shared something intense, in a way I wasn't sure I'd expected. When we got close to the wedding hall again, I hesitated, the noise starting to seep back in. Laughter, music, that unmistakable clatter of plates and chatter. The normal world was waiting. I wasn't sure I wanted to jump straight back into it after the night we'd just had. Alex noticed and gave me a quick, understanding smile. We can take a little break before we go back in. Maybe a walk? I nodded. We turned down a side street, away from the crowd, and just started walking without a plan. The pavement was still wet from some earlier rain, and the air smelled fresh, with that subtle mix of city and something like possibility. So, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, how often do you sneak off from family events? He chuckled. Not often, but tonight it felt right. I guess sometimes you have to make your own moments. I liked that. It sounded like a philosophy worth stealing. We walked in silence for a bit, then Alex stopped and turned to face me. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? Like, really happy with how things are? The question hit me harder than I thought it would. I blinked, trying not to overthink it. I don't know. I mean, I'm okay. But happy? I guess I never really gave it much thought. He smiled softly, like he was glad I said that. Sometimes, I think we get so caught up trying to fit in or do what's expected, we forget to check in with ourselves. It was true. Weddings, family expectations, The whole 9 yards. It's easy to feel like you're just going through the motions. We kept walking, and the conversation drifted to lighter stuff. Favorite movies, guilty pleasures, terrible songs we secretly loved. But that moment stuck with me. At some point, we circled back to the venue. The sun was coming up, casting this golden glow that made everything look softer, almost magical. It was weird to think that just a few hours ago, I was drowning in awkwardness and small talk, and now here I was, standing outside the place with someone who felt different. Alex reached out and took my hand before I could overthink it. His grip was warm and sure, like a silent promise that whatever happened next, I wasn't alone. Inside, the reception was winding down. A few guests were scattered around, some tired, some still buzzing from the night. The groom was off somewhere, probably recovering from his own version of the party. I caught a glimpse of him, laughing with his new husband, and honestly, it was kind of beautiful. Alex squeezed my hand. "Want to get a coffee?" "I know a place that's open 24/7. I smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." We left the venue behind again, stepping into the morning light. The whole night felt like one of those moments you wish you could freeze and replay when life gets complicated. At the coffee shop, we grabbed 2 steaming cups and found a little corner booth. The warmth of the mug in my hands was comforting, and I noticed Alex watching me with this curious, gentle look. So, I started, "What happens now?" I mean, we met at a wedding, got drunk, snuck off to a rooftop, and talked until dawn. "Pretty crazy," he laughed. "Yeah, crazy, but maybe good crazy?" Maybe. We talked more about what we wanted, what scared us, and what felt possible. There was no rush, no pressure, just 2 people figuring things out. Eventually, the sun was fully up, and the city was waking around us. I realized I hadn't felt this connected to someone in a long time. It wasn't just the alcohol or the thrill of the night. It was something real. When we finally stepped outside, I felt like the world had shifted just a little. Alex looked at me and smiled, that same easy charm from before, but with something deeper now. "Coffee again sometime?" he asked. "Definitely." As we said our goodbyes, I didn't know where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready to find out. And honestly, sometimes the best nights start when you take a chance on the unexpected. After that morning coffee, I thought things might settle into something casual, like a one-off night that was fun, but ultimately just a story to tell. But Alex had other plans, or maybe I did. The line between the two got blurry fast. We exchanged numbers with that easy smile, that kind of smile that tells you this isn't just going to be some forgettable fling. And honestly, I was okay with that. I spent the next day replaying parts of the night, from the rooftop glow to the way his hand felt in mine. It was strange, in a good way. Like a fresh page had been flipped in my life without me even realizing it. A few days later, I got a text from him. Just a simple, "Hey, wanna grab dinner?" But even that felt electric. I found myself texting back faster than I thought I would. We met at this little Italian place he recommended, the kind of spot where the lighting is low and the pasta smells like home. The night had that relaxed vibe, nothing forced, just 2 people who wanted to keep talking. We dove into everything, favorite childhood memories, ridiculous family traditions, and the kind of deep stuff you usually avoid on first dates. But with Alex, it felt natural, like peeling back layers without fear of being judged. There was a quiet honesty in him that made it easier to be honest with myself. At one point, he reached across the table and took my hand again, that same warmth as before. I squeezed back, the connection buzzing beneath the surface, like electricity. "So," he said, voice low, "what are you looking for?" I blinked, caught off guard by how direct he was. "I don't know. I guess something real? Something that doesn't feel like pretending," he nodded thoughtfully. "Me too. I'm tired of the bullshit, you know? The games, the expectations." We sat there for a minute, hands still intertwined. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of texts, late-night calls, and stolen moments. We weren't official, at least not by any label. But there was this undeniable pull. I found myself rearranging plans, showing up early just to see him smile. And every time I did, it felt like I was coming back to a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. One night, after a movie marathon at his place, we found ourselves close on the worn-out couch, the credits rolling but neither of us moving. He looked at me, eyes soft and a little uncertain. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, almost whispering. I didn't hesitate. I leaned in, and that first kiss was everything. A little nervous, a little electric, but full of promise. It wasn't just about the physical. It was like we were finally acknowledging something that had been simmering beneath the surface. After that, things started to shift. We stopped hiding the connection, telling friends, sharing little stories about each other. It felt like stepping into a new chapter, one where I wasn't afraid to be seen for who I really was. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of doubt, questions about what this meant for both of us. Alex had his own baggage, family expectations, the pressure of being the good brother at that wedding I met him at. And I had my own fears about diving into something real after years of playing it safe. One evening, we found ourselves sitting on his balcony, the city sprawled out below us. The air was thick with unspoken worries. "Do you think this will last?" I asked, honestly scared. He took my hand, his grip steady. "I don't know, but I want to try, with you." That was all I needed to hear, because sometimes taking a chance isn't about knowing the outcome. It's about choosing someone despite the uncertainty. Looking back, I can't believe how that wedding night spiraled into something so unexpected. From a random drunken escape to this, something real, something raw, something worth fighting for. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between exhilaration and uncertainty. Alex and I were carving out this new space between us. A mix of late-night texts, secret smiles in crowded rooms, and hesitant touches that sent my heart into overdrive. But with all that sweetness came the inevitable undercurrent of doubt. We both knew things weren't as simple as they looked. One afternoon, a few weeks after that balcony night, Alex invited me over to meet his family. Or, more accurately, to meet his parents. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Family. That whole thing I'd sidestepped my entire life, because it always felt like a minefield. I remember sitting on the bus, heart pounding, rehearsing what I'd say, wondering if I'd mess it all up. What if they didn't accept me? What if Alex's family made me feel like the intruder I sometimes feared I was? But when I got to his place, Alex greeted me with that calm confidence I'd come to depend on. "Ready?" he asked, slipping his hand into mine. "Not really," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "We'll take it slow," he promised. And somehow, that was enough. His parents were waiting in the living room when we arrived, his mom with a warm smile, and his dad with the kind of quiet nod that felt like approval already earned. It wasn't perfect. There was an awkward pause when Alex introduced me as someone special, but the conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. They asked about my job, my family, the usual small talk, mixed with genuine interest. At one point, his mom pulled me aside and said, "Alex has never seemed happier." That speaks volumes. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. The night ended with hugs and promises to visit again soon. Walking back to the bus stop with Alex, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Like maybe this, whatever this was, could actually work. But reality has a way of sneaking back in. A few days later, I caught Alex staring off into space, phone in hand, a shadow across his features I hadn't seen before. "What's up?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's my brother." The groom. The reason we'd met in the first place. "Everything okay?" He sighed. "Not really. He's struggling. Things with his husband aren't great. And it's spilling over into the family. There's tension, arguments, all that mess. I could see the weight on Alex's shoulders, the way he wanted to help but felt powerless. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "That please mess." "Yeah." He agreed. And it's making things complicated. I'm caught in the middle, and sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing by not picking sides. I wanted to say something profound, but all I could do was pull him into a hug. You're not alone in this. Those moments when life got messy were the hardest, but they also made us stronger. We learned to lean on each other, to be patient when one of us needed space, to communicate even when it was uncomfortable. One evening, after a particularly rough day, Alex showed up at my door, rain soaking his jacket, eyes tired but determined. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We sat in the dim light of my living room, talking for hours, unpacking fears, hopes, and everything in between. It was raw and honest, the kind of conversation that could either break you or build something unbreakable. By the time the rain stopped, we were tangled on the couch, the world outside quiet, except for the occasional drip from the gutters. And in that moment, with the weight of everything still lingering, but somehow less heavy, I realized this was more than just a fling or a wild night gone right. This was real, and maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what I needed all along. The morning after that long night, the one where we just sat and talked until the rain stopped, I woke up in my own bed with this strange mix of contentment and nervous excitement. I guess that's what falling for someone feels like, huh? That weird tall tale of hope and uncertainty that keeps your heart racing, even when everything seems calm. I checked my phone and saw a message from Alex. "Coffee later? I owe you one after last night." I smiled and texted back, "Definitely." By the time we met up that afternoon, the city had warmed up, sun cutting through the clouds like a promise. We grabbed our drinks and found a quiet bench in the park, the kind of spot where the noise of the city just fades into the background. We talked about everything and nothing. Plans for the weekend, dumb movies we both secretly loved, and how weird it was that a chance meeting at a wedding had turned into this whole thing. At one point, I caught him staring at me, not in a creepy way, but that kind of look that makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. "What?" I asked, feeling my cheeks heat up. "Nothing," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Just thinking about how lucky I am to have found you." I laughed, trying to play it cool but failing miserably. "You're making me blush." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Good." That simple touch sent a jolt through me. It was funny how something so small could feel so big. As the days went on, we slipped into a rhythm. Not perfect, but ours. Coffee dates, movie nights, long walks where we'd get lost just to have more time together. Every moment felt like building something new, something worth holding on to. But then, just when I was starting to believe maybe this could be forever, the past came knocking. One evening, while I was at work, I got a call from my sister. Her voice was tight, worried. "Mom's sick," she said. "You need to come home." It hit me like a ton of bricks. My mom and I hadn't been close for years, but this was different. Suddenly, all the things I'd been trying to leave behind were crashing back. I told Alex what was going on, watching his face shift from concern to determination. "Go," he said firmly. "I'll be here when you get back." It was the first time I realized how much he cared. Not just the fun, easy parts, but the messy, complicated ones too. The trip home was a whirlwind of hospital waiting rooms, whispered conversations with doctors, and awkward family dinners where old wounds were poked and prodded. I found myself leaning on Alex more than I expected, even from miles away, late-night calls where his voice was the only thing keeping me grounded. Texts filled with his usual blend of sarcasm and warmth that made me laugh even when I felt like breaking down. After a week, I finally returned, exhausted but grateful to be back with him. We met at the same park bench, the city lights twinkling as dusk settled in. Sitting there, I realized that love isn't just about the good times. It's about showing up when things get hard, about being the person who stays when everything else falls apart. Alex looked at me and smiled, that easy, genuine smile that had drawn me in from the start. "Welcome back," he said. "Missed you." I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of everything lift just a little. "Missed you too." And in that moment, surrounded by the noise and chaos of life, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. After that night in the park, things between Alex and me felt like they were settling into something solid. Not the kind of fairy tale easy, but the real, messy, imperfect kind that makes you feel alive. I was starting to let myself believe this wasn't just a fling or a phase, but something that could actually last. But, Of course, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It started with a text one evening while I was at work. My phone buzzed, and I saw it was from Alex, but the usual casual tone was gone. It read, "Can we talk? Face to face. It's important." That simple message sent a knot twisting in my stomach. I replied immediately, "Sure. When? Now, if possible." I made a quick excuse, told my manager I needed to step out, and practically sprinted to the cafe near his place where we'd agreed to meet. When I slid into the booth across from him, I could see the tension etched into his face. His fingers tapped nervously on the table, and when he looked up at me, something in his eyes made me hold my breath. "Okay," he started, voice low. "I've been thinking a lot about my brother lately. That was new territory." He'd talked before about his brother's struggles, but this felt different, more serious. He called me yesterday. Alex continued. Said he's thinking about separating from his husband. Things have been rough, but this feels like a real breaking point. I nodded, feeling that mix of sympathy and apprehension. Families are complicated, especially when relationships are fraying. "I want to help him," Alex said, voice thick, "but I'm scared it'll pull me in too deep, mess things up for us." I reached out and covered his hand with mine. "Hey, whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this." He gave me a small, grateful smile. "Thanks. That means more than you know." The weeks that followed were a balancing act. Alex was torn between supporting his brother and trying to build a life with me. I saw the late-night phone calls, the moments when his mood would darken without warning, and the way he'd sometimes disappear for hours. One night, we were lying in bed after a long day, the silence between us heavy but comfortable. "Do you think we're strong enough for this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face me, eyes soft but serious. "I want to believe we are, but it's going to take work, honesty, patience. I'm willing to try," I said. He smiled, that same quiet confidence that had drawn me in months ago. Me too. Then came the night I wasn't prepared for. Alex's brother showed up at his door, suitcase in hand, looking exhausted and defeated. They'd finally had the talk, the one where everything spilled out, raw and messy. Alex invited him in without hesitation. Over the next few days, our place turned into a crash pad of sorts. Late-night conversations, awkward breakfasts, and the realization that love sometimes means making room not just for the person you care about, but for their family too. I wasn't sure I was ready for all of it, but seeing Alex through it, how fiercely loyal and compassionate he was, made me want to be better, to hold on tighter. There were moments, sure, when it felt overwhelming, when I questioned if I could handle the chaos, but then Alex would look at me with those eyes, steady and full of trust, and I'd remember why I stayed. One evening, after a particularly intense family dinner, Alex and I found ourselves alone on the balcony again. The city lights stretched out below us, a sea of possibility. He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Me too," I whispered back. "But I don't want to lose this," he said. "You." I shook my head, smiling despite the weight of it all. "You won't. Not if I have anything to say about it." We stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort in the uncertainty. Because love isn't about having all the answers. It's about holding on when everything else feels like it's falling apart. And with Alex, I was ready to hold on for as long as it took. Months passed, and with them came a kind of steady rhythm I hadn't dared hope for. Alex's brother found his footing again, carving out his own space, and the tension that had once crowded our lives began to ease. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. But it felt like we were building something real, something worth holding on to. One Saturday afternoon, we found ourselves back on that same rooftop where it all started, the city sprawling beneath us. The light softer now with the sun dipping low. We sat side by side on the ledge, our legs dangling over the edge, sharing a bottle of wine and a quiet comfort that only comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Alex nudged me gently. "Remember that night? I smiled, the memory vivid, the laughter, the nervous glances, the way everything shifted without warning. Yeah, I said. Who would have thought a wedding could change everything? He looked at me then, eyes reflecting the fading light. It did. You did. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. I'm glad you took me to that groomsman's room. He laughed softly. Me too. There was a pause, the kind that holds everything unsaid but understood. I turned to him, heart pounding just a little, and reached for his hand. Whatever comes next, I said, I want to face it with you. Alex squeezed my hand, his smile steady and sure. Me too. No more running from the messy stuff. Together. In that moment, with the city humming beneath us and the sky glowing soft and golden, it felt like we were exactly where we belonged. Two people who found each other not despite the chaos, but because of it. Love, I realized, isn't about perfect timing or flawless beginnings. It's about showing up, again and again, for someone when it matters most. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to show up. Not just for Alex, but for whatever the future had in store. Because sometimes, the best nights don't just end. They become the start of something you never expected, but always needed. And that's exactly what this was.